500 and growing.
Podcast.
Dedicated to the underdog, cause I see you. Working on your craft, getting strong, cause I see you. Ready to set it off and on, cause I see you. Correcting all that is wrong, cause I see you. Cause I see you. I see you. I see you. Welcome to the 500 and Growing podcast. I am your host, Jesus Azteca 500 Sanchez, and today we have Jessie Santiago. Jessie Santiago is somebody that I met in the Filipino community when I was doing a lot of activism work. I was doing a lot of emceeing, or what people call rapping, right? And my rhymes were really about like Mexican culture. And the Pinoy community, the Filipino community, was a really beautiful community that was making really great cultural events. And so they did a night called KNR,
Cultural Night of Resistance.
Cultural Night of Resistance, yeah. And so I was invited to like perform in some of those cultural events. And one thing that was really beautiful about those events were that, you know, families went to those events. So it wasn't just like people our age. It was people our age, people that were older, and little kids running around. And so those events were like incredibly powerful. And I really got close with a group of Filipinos that were like really doing some powerful cultural work in Chicago. I was able to meet Jessie. Jessie and I we met each other before this, but we both started doing Kali because in the Hamlin house, they had a backyard. And I'm not sure what the connection was with Guro Nate. Guro Nate was specialized in Filipino martial arts. And Kali is a martial arts that's done with machetes, with two machetes or one machete. But instead of using machetes in order to train, you use bamboo sticks. And we were both doing it at the Hamlin house. And Jessie has become a guru at Filipino martial arts through the Defensor method. Jessie has always been like a really great person, always had a really good heart. And, I want to welcome him. So everybody, let's welcome Jessie.
Good evening.
So yeah, man, how are you doing, Jessie?
Doing good. Just doing my usual thing of being a hermit, just editing while I have my TV playing in the background. So every time I have to wait for something to render on my computer while I'm editing a video, I'll turn my head. I'm like, what movie is playing randomly in the background?
Yeah. You already know you've already seen like Godfather or Goodfellas or...
Yeah, actually, there's this one app that I have playing on my PlayStation 4 called Tubi. Yeah. And it has all those movies, like those B movies from like the 80s and 90s.
Okay. And
I always select like those random horror movies that you can't find anywhere. But you remember back in the day with like the old VHS stores, you would go in and you see random horror movies.
Yeah.
That wasn't mainstream, but
yeah. Like, very gory.
Yeah, and like, wow, they all have these movies on Tubi. And I was like, man, this is taking me back to my childhood. Yeah. So I'll have that playing like on a low volume while I'm editing. And just it's just something that my routine. I'm like, all right, make my coffee, start my computer, choose a random movie, and then get to work and then start doing my thing.
Yeah, and Jesse's a videographer. He also does editing. Jesse's done a lot of music videos, makes instructional videos about Filipino martial arts through some of his and recording some of his work. But Jessie, how did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Well, I was really born in Canada, in Montreal. I came to Chicago when I was like 2 or 3 years old, and we were staying with my relatives up in Evanston. The original plan when my parents told me when I was older was like we were supposed to end up in California. But my parents originally, they found work here in Chicago and we ended up staying. So I grew up mostly in the like Evanston and Skokie area. And then within that time was just, I went to like at least like 3 or 4 different schools because we moved around like every 2 years from one apartment to the other before my parents finally got a house in 1988 in like the border between Skokie and Evanston. So growing up, I was like, oh, I was like the new kid, and I didn't really know if I was shy. I didn't know what I was, what am I doing here? Most of my friends growing up were either like Haitian or Puerto Rican. And so I didn't really grow up around Filipinos when I was a youth. I didn't really start hanging around Filipinos or Asians until I was like in my teenage years or early college years. So I mean, growing up, I was just a regular kid. When I was a young kid, I was like Transformers, G.I. Joe cartoons. My two older brothers were most of the time they were babysitting me, so I would watch horror movies with them.
So you're 3 brothers?
I have 2 older brothers.
Okay.
They're 12 and 10 years older than me. So
whoa.
Yeah. So they were like my father figures growing up because my dad was always working. Both my parents were always working.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, besides just Saturday morning cartoons, after school cartoons, just regular kid stuff. I didn't really go out as much. Both my parents were pretty much strict. Where they're like, yeah, like they don't feel comfortable with me going out to go like hang out with friends or play in the park or
have negative influences.
Yeah, so they're like, you go to school, you come home, and that was it. So
yeah, man, that's crazy though because you were the third out of 3, right? So
yeah.
It's just like you were the baby, and usually you hear stories about the baby. The baby's just like the parents have had enough already. The baby's just like they let them loose.
Yeah.
Looser than they do for the older kids. The first kid is the one that gets the most heat. They're the ones that have to touch the stove and figure out that it's gonna burn their hand, and they really get punished for it, right? And so you usually hear the opposite, that they're not super strict with the last child.
Yeah. Well, I mean, compared to how my brothers grew up, yeah, it was strict with me, but not as strict as both of them growing up in the Philippines.
Ooh, okay.
Just like, yeah, my oldest brother was like, according to my mom, was a troublemaker because he would always break the rules. My second oldest brother is more of the straight arrow. So he follows everything by the book.
Yeah.
So I mean, with me, if I look back at my childhood, it was just like pretty much normal. Both parents worked. My brothers most of the time took care of me. I didn't really have a chance to develop a relationship with my dad because he used to work like graveyard shift.
Yeah.
But I respect my father, but I feel like there's like a disconnect between us. So even to this day, I'm like, I respect my dad, but I feel like we don't really connect for some reason.
Or you don't know him deeply.
And he's like old school, traditional Filipino. So he's not the type to, say what's on his mind or his feelings. It's kind of similar to that, machismo, like I'm the man.
Yeah.
Listen to me.
Like I don't cry.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever thought about like breaking down those barriers that you have between you guys?
I mean, if we're having like a beer from time to time, we'll talk. But it is what it is at this point. And I talked to a lot of my Filipino friends that had similar experiences growing up.
Yeah.
It's just, and that's how I saw like, what the father figure is like he brings home the bacon, and then you do what he says.
Yeah.
And if not, then you get you get the belt or whatever. So
okay. Yeah, I got the belt a lot, but it was my mom that was giving it to me. Man,
I got it 4 ways: my dad, my mom, and my 2 older brothers. Because whatever my parents said, my brothers reinforced it.
So you got hit twice for the same thing?
Yeah. If I defied my mom, then my brothers were there to enforce the hand, the belt. So,
okay. So she was like, she sent out a hit on you.
Yeah.
What did you see growing up that you wanted to change?
I didn't really think about it that deeply of things changing. Because like when you're in your adolescence, you're like, oh, I want, when you're 16, like I want to drive. 18, I want my own place. 21, I can drink. For me, I just wanted the freedom to do what I want because I was really sheltered growing up. And my parents didn't really give leeway until I hit college because I was going to Columbia College in downtown, and they just told me be careful, but you're old enough to take care of yourself. And within that time, I was like, I really wanted to go to downtown Chicago as a teenager, but they're like, nope, you're not allowed to go down there by yourself, even with friends.
So this was before going to Columbia College?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
did you ever break the rules and you were like, nah, I'm going?
No, because I always feared my two older brothers.
The enforcers in the family.
Pretty much.
Okay.
And the only time that I went as a teen to downtown was for my prom. That was at Navy Pier.
Okay.
So that was the first time I got to go to Chicago on my own.
What was it like to be Filipino around a whole bunch of people that weren't Filipino? Did you ever feel out of place? Like, did you ever suffer racism as a young kid? Like,
yeah, I mean, especially if it wasn't like a mainstream, because like Filipinos are they're the enigma because we're Asian complexion with the Spanish last name, and then growing up they're like ching chong or like you gook, but I'm like I would get into fights and saying like, oh, I'm Filipino, but like what's that? I mean, even to this day, people don't know what a Filipino is. And like, Filipino, like, is that somewhere in Mexico? And I was like, like no, it's the Pacific Islands off the in the Pacific off the coast of archipelago of Indonesia. Mm-hmm. And people don't know history, then they're like, if we're not the mainstream Asians like China, Korea, Japan, they're like, well, where's all the other Asian countries that's not really taught here in the States? They're not really enforced, like taught the culture of where these countries are and what their cultures are.
One of the things that I really found interesting was hanging out with you guys and like figuring out that Magellan was killed by Lapu-Lapu as soon as he saw him. And it was just like, damn, I wish that Montezuma would have done that, like that's gangster. But we'll talk about that later when we talk about the Hamlin House and the cultural aspect of what that was like. Because I imagine now, hearing your story, you not really being around Filipinos, for you to be in the Hamlin House must have been like an awakening that really impacted your life because you were proud to be Filipino in that space. Like I said, like the events, you would have young people, older people, you would have babies in the events, right? So I'm rapping and there's a woman in front of me that has like a 18-month-old in her arms, and they're like 3 and 5-year-olds running around while I'm performing. And I was never used to that environment because whenever I performed, it was usually people our age.
Yeah, because it was definitely different from my relatives in the suburbs, like suburban Filipinos as opposed to the city Filipinos. Two different cultures within itself. But yeah, when I got hooked up at the Hamlin House, it was different. Like we shared similar likes in terms of like art and culture. Not everything had to be revolved around pop culture, or who's dating who and all that stuff. In the mainstream, or like, talking about other stuff that's deeper in terms of, why are you into this cultural event? Why are you into this Filipino community? What makes this different from all the other Filipino cultural community gatherings? Because like for me growing up, I saw a lot of the events in like the Filipino newspaper, and a lot of it didn't really interest me because it was about some doctor who sponsored his daughter's cotillion. Like what does that have to do with me? So
yeah, for sure.
I was like, so like the bourgeois, like classist Filipinos that have money, like, oh, look at my daughter.
Yeah, showing off.
Yeah, so I was like, because like my parents, like we grew up like middle lower class, so we just lived by our means and we didn't really try to like compete with anyone.
Yeah.
And my dad, this is one thing I respect with my dad is like he kept us away from the family politics. Like he's like, stay away from
the venom.
Yeah. So it's like the only family that matters are the ones in this house.
For sure.
So
that's dope, man.
Yeah.
So how did you interact with the Hamlin House? Well, first, like, what was the Hamlin House, and how did you get connected? How did you get plugged?
Well, if I have to, rewind on that. Well, my cousin was the lead singer with Bugwees at that time, and she was heavily involved with the Hamlin House people. One time, she invited me to the backyard of the Hamlin House, and I met everyone there. It was like Demetrio, Mike, Randy, and like.
And all these people were beautiful people, man. Like whenever I went to the Hamlin House, it was just like good vibes.
Yeah, and the different thing too was like these were immigrants from the Philippines. They weren't Phil Amps. They weren't born here, so their mannerisms and how they carry themselves were different.
And what was the Hamlin House?
So Hamlin House was owned by my friend Mike and his wife Jen. So it was a 2-flat house up in Albany Park, and it was a living quarters. So they lived on the first floor flat, and they rented out the second flat. And within that time, they would have meetings for, CPI, which stands for the Cultural Filipino Issues, or they would have that for like meetings or whatever. They would also use that house as a jam session for musicians. How I got introduced into going there frequently was when I got introduced to Filipino Martial Arts. Mm-hmm. So I think it was at the time, I don't remember who, I don't know if it was Mike Carubin or if it was Chris Dino that told me about it. Because at that time I was like heavily into mixed martial arts. At one point I was training for MMA.
Yeah, I remember when we met, when we were doing Kali, you were just like, punch me in my side as hard as you can. And I was just like, what? He was like, yeah, punch me as hard as you can.
Yeah.
I was like,
I was going hardcore.
I have punched you because I didn't feel right just punching you without you punching me. But I was just like, damn, Jesse's serious about this.
Yeah, I was really serious. And like, I was like, man, I was at that time, this is before I started the media business, and I was training like almost hardcore. So I was doing like Chinese kickboxing, which is called Sunda, Jeet Kune Do concepts, a little bit of boxing, and a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But that was a lot of money back then. I mean, it's even a lot of money now, especially if you don't have a consistent paycheck. Mm-hmm. And I was paying like $250 a month for training. Yeah. And then when I heard about the Hamlin House and the Filipino Martial Arts Workshop for that summer, that was about in 2004. Mm-hmm. I tried it out for that 3 months, and then, I liked it, but I just didn't have the budget for it. Yeah. So, but yeah, I trained a couple more years. And then when I started the media business is when I stopped training. So that was around 06, 07 when I stopped training martial arts altogether. Cause it came to that point where I'm like, this feels like a job. I'm not enjoying martial arts anymore because, it's like, oh, I have to go train. I have to watch what I eat, all this stuff. And it just took the joy out of it.
So you're talking about like doing MMA?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So living that lifestyle of like diet, making weight.
Yeah, like I was always getting injured too. So I was just like, every time I was like, all right, I got an amateur fight coming up, I always get injured. Yeah. So I'm just like, what's the point? Okay. I'm getting rocked in sparring. I'm getting, submitted. And I'm like, how much am I going to make from this amateur fight? 0? What, a trophy? I'm like,
yeah. No, yeah, my cousin's a fighter, like I was telling you earlier. Oscar the Shank Jurado Sanchez. He's a badass, man. He be knocking people out. But he's finally getting to a place where he's getting sponsorships and stuff like that. So things are starting to kind of roll in. He's going to do the UFC Fight Pass in a couple weeks. And so it's just like I've seen that amateur side of things. Mm. Him working a 9 to 5 and then still trying to train. Yeah. And so now he finally got to a place in the gym where he's hosting his own classes and he's getting paid to do it.
Oh, nice.
So it's really dope to see his progression. But yeah, I've seen it, is what I'm saying, is that I can relate to the hard life of what it's like to be an amateur.
Yeah. I mean, because I've had friends that fought like kickboxing and Muay Thai and boxing, and they're like, yeah, they'll fight amateur, for a little bit, then just trying to get their way into doing things pro. But then they're like, their bodies are already shot. They're like, yeah, 17 fights in, and they're like, yeah, my knees are already jacked up. And you're like, where's that Mayweather money?
Is there anything that you saw growing up that you wanted to make a change in your adulthood?
Well, as a kid, like my parents weren't really as strict with me in terms of what I should study or what career path I should go into. They gave me complete freedom of what I wanted to go into. So I was like, shoot, I went to film school as a teen. Like, I remember as a kid, like, since I watched a lot of horror films with my brothers, like, I said I wanted to make horror movies, like, when I grow up. And then that kind of fizzled out when I became when I was in my teenage years, and I was like, maybe I want to go into like the video game industry because I was really into video games. And then I've kind of like rediscovered my passion for film when I saw like Halloween H2O when it came out like in 97, 98. I'm like, man, this movie is terrible. They didn't carry on the previous story from the previous storyline, so I decided to like focus going back into studying film. So in terms of the changes that I wanted to make, like there's been so many paths that I've thought about, like, because I grew up that basic mentality: go to school, go to work. Once you're done with college, get a job, find a girl, get married, have kids. By the time you're 21, 22. Apparently, life doesn't work like that anymore. And I thought that was going to be my life. But in terms of where my life has taken me and my choices and, where my passions are in terms of like art, being free to make my own choices and not really have to answer to anyone. I just wanted to just live my life drama free and just do what I enjoy. That's what, it's just coaching from my, my parents and my brothers. There are time to time they're like, it's never too late to go to school if you want to go study this, to make more money. I'm content now with what I have. But there's always room for improvement in terms of how do I make more, or how do I blow this business up more? Because when you're doing everything yourself, you get burnt out, especially when you do like social media stuff. The burnout is like for real. And I need time to myself. That time to myself, I know I should be applying myself to, maybe I should be doing something, but instead of me just sitting on the couch and just zoning out. But the changes that I want to do is like, I don't want to ever work for another person again. Just because of my experience in my 20s running a business, and then trying to go back to working for someone is just like, it's just sucks out your soul for me. Like if you're working for someone else or for another business.
We talk about that fork in the road, right? So like, what was that fork in the road like for you, where you decided to work for yourself, where you decided to leave that 9 to 5 and to commit to building what you're building? And I think that what you're building is beautiful. Like I see you, I see you on social media, and you're like consistently in a different city.
Yeah.
You're making videos featuring the Filipino martial arts. I see that you're really well respected in the Filipino martial art world. It's really nice to see that, man.
I had a lot of fork in the roads moments.
Yeah, what were they like? What was it like making that decision?
After film school, I had 2 buddies, and our goal was to try to move out to Hollywood and pursue our dreams working in the industry. 3 months before graduation, one friend got his girlfriend pregnant, and he's like, yeah, I can't go to LA anymore. So I'm like, shit, man. I was like, we had a plan.
Yeah.
A month later, before graduation, my other buddy's like, hey, I got to move back to North Carolina to help out with the family business. So I'm like, shoot. So like that kind of like messed up my plans, or our plans of trying to pursue our career. And I'm like, dude, we went to film school. We need to go work in this field. So,
and it would have like helped you with the cost, because LA is like super expensive. So I would imagine that you would have gotten an apartment where all of you would be able to stay, right?
Exactly. And I was just like, shoot. So my brother's like, why don't you work at Target? I have a friend that works there. Save up money, and then see if you could request a transfer from I was out in the burbs at the time, from the burbs of Illinois to LA.
Yeah.
So I did that for a year and a half. I hated it because I was working graveyard, and it was a weird time too. Like it was from 3 a.m. to 11:30 a.m.
Yeah.
And so my sleeping schedule was all messed up, and that's kind of like the same time I started like training MMA just to get my stress out. So that was like, I was thinking about going to MMA and fight because I was just so frustrated with how things turned out in terms of my friends let me down.
The goals. Your goals, like you were like, damn.
Yeah.
Like we had, like we committed to this, and
yeah.
And now I'm the only one that's ready to do this now.
Exactly. And so, MMA was like my therapy and like a goal. I'm like, maybe I could do this as a career. But this was like around 2003, 2004. A couple of college buddies of mine approached me and said, like, why don't we start up our own, video production company? And we had no, business experience.
Yeah.
So we just opened up, we scoured up all our money and just opened up our own video business.
Yeah.
And this was the same time I met you, because right after I left Target, I went to go working as a temporary contractor for Video Machete.
Yeah.
So I was doing Video Machete and running a business at the same time, plus training for mixed martial arts, because I just wanted to see what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I was working for Video Machete at the time was I just wanted to work in something that's related to my field.
Yeah.
So anything with video or film related. And they're like, we're a nonprofit that works with youth, teaching them video. I'm like, cool, I'm there, sign me up.
Yeah.
Just get me out of Target.
For sure.
So that plus teaching, mixed martial arts, and then everything was really good with the video business from like 2004. I mean, we got a 500 square foot office downtown, and everything was good till about 2008 before the economy crashed. So within that time, like, there was another fork in the road with me. I'm like arguing with my business partners of what we need to do. And prior to that, I stopped training for mixed martial arts because I was going 100% on the video business. And I was just like, man, it's like, I'm starting to hate video, because now it's like we have to figure out how to stay afloat, plus pay ourselves, plus, pay the utilities and rent for our space. And this was the time that we moved our office from downtown to Pilsen. And we only lasted a year before we finally folded up shop. And I was just like, man, it's like, it was a learning experience where, like, if your business partners, especially your friends, if you're not on the same page of where the direction is going with the business, it's like not going to work out. And that fucker owes me money too still. So yeah. I mean, it's definitely a learning experience. I mean, in your 20s, like, you don't know what the hell you're doing. So that was one fork in the road. And I had another friend that from Chicago that moved back, because he moved out to LA after graduating, worked out there for a couple of years, then he moved back to Chicago. So this was around 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working with him, and I was flying back and forth between Chicago and LA working on video projects. And so I was trying to make my connections out there. And 2009, where I was like, I'm done with Chicago. Like, I need to get the heck out of here.
Yeah.
And, I tried to move out to LA in 2009. And so I was like couch surfing, like on friends' couches, just trying to like see who's going to, hire me.
Yeah.
And all the people that I made connects with, they're like, I was calling them up. I'm like, yeah,
I'm here.
I'm here. And either they wouldn't return my phone calls, or they would flake out and say like, yeah, I got something going on. Or if they did agree to meet up, they would cancel. So I was just like, damn. So I was like, dude, I'm like, you told me like if I'm out here to hit you up. And I was like living from couch to couch. I finally came back to Chicago, and I was just like in a bad mental space. And so like another fork in the road is like, what am I gonna do next? And that's when I met up with Cesar again when he had his shop up north.
Yeah.
My Essence.
Yeah.
And ran into Guro Nate and the rest of the guys that I trained with back in 2004 and 2000 from 2004, and like I started training again.
Yeah. So Chris was training this whole time, right?
Yeah, him and his crew were always consistent with it.
Okay.
I stopped martial arts altogether like around 2007, 2006, because I knew I wanted a break from it. But yeah, I mean, that's when I started training again, Defensor method and Filipino martial arts, just for my own therapy, just to get me out of my negative space that I was in within that time frame.
Yeah.
So that was another fork in the road. Then after me and my friend went our separate ways, because he was starting to have kids, and like that became his priority, and I was like, shoot, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
Ended up moving to the Hamlin house, and I was doing freelance video work. And at the time, Mike was telling me like, hey, we know we've hired you in the past to do videos for FMA Pulse. would you like to be our business partner? So I was just like, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, I remember when you guys were starting to work together.
Yeah, that was like 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
And, we were traveling to New Jersey, doing interviews. Mike and Romeo went to the Philippines, did an interview, and I was editing them. I did a couple of interviews here in Illinois, but then my mom got sick, like in I would say that was 2012 when she got diagnosed with early stages of breast cancer.
Wow.
So I'm like, shoot, put things into perspective. I'm like, shoot, no, my mom's sick. I'm freaking 32 years old. I'm broke. What am I going to do? So I took whatever money I had left, declared bankruptcy just to wipe out all the debt I had from the business and all the credit card debt I had in the past.
Yeah.
Moved back home with my parents, and I started working at a warehouse just to like stack up money.
Yeah.
At that time, I was like, I don't want to do this forever. I took a long, hard look of where I was at. And I was like, since I had experience, doing these after school programs, why don't I just get my master's in education? So that's when I decided to go to grad school. So that was like, all right, went to grad school, got a job working for a nonprofit and working in school. And that was between 2014 to 2017. And within that time, I was like, it was cool. It was great at first. I was like, yeah, I feel like an adult now. I got my degree. I'm working in my field. I got health benefits, all this stuff that makes you feel like, oh, I'm an adult now.
So you were a teacher?
Yep. So it was a 2-teacher setup. It was a different type of teaching program at the school that we were at. But yeah, I mean, everything was great in the beginning until all the stuff that I learned in grad school of like why nonprofits fall apart. All the things that we learned happened while I was there. Man, the in-school teaching, I was like, man, I wish I was back in, after-school programming, because it was tough. Like, you're dealing with 80 to 100 students a day.
And some of them don't want to be there.
Exactly.
Like, at least in the after-school, they're choosing to go there.
Exactly.
And you don't have, like, incredible discipline problems.
Exactly.
And when you have kids there that are just, like, they're going against everything that you're trying to say.
Mm.
And you're just like, yo, you're just making this class horrible for everybody else.
Yeah. And
you end up, it's that class that you're just like, damn.
Especially like with the invention of the smartphones, they're like, they can't put it down.
Yeah.
And like, they're always like, at the time, like Snapchat this, Snapchat that. And then they would be counterproductive because they're always on their phone. Yeah. I mean, it was a different time from when I was teaching after school programming between 2004 and 2009.
Yeah, the after school matters and Video Machete.
The mentality of the teens that we were working with at that point, how that differed with the teens I was dealing with from 2014 to 2017 are way different. I worked in the education system and nonprofit world from 2014 till 2017. And then another fork in the road. I'm like, okay, I still love Filipino martial arts. It's been my therapy up to this point. Let me look at FMA Pulse again. And that's when I just like, I'm going to go full bore on this.
And that's during that time, right?
2017. Yep. 2017.
Yeah. Cause I remember that change where I was just like, okay, Jesse's hitting it now. Like he made a statement, like I'm going hardcore. I mean, that's how I read it.
Actually, I started going hardcore with Filipino martial arts in 2009 when I got back into it. Like I said, it was therapy for me. It was getting in touch with my roots. So it didn't feel like it was a job. That was when I started taking it more seriously. And I did that up until my second year of grad school. So that was like around 2014, 2015. I actually started teaching in 2012, basics, because I saw a lot of people having trouble in class. Because traditionally how Filipino martial arts was taught was like, we do so many random things from weapons to empty hand to grappling that it's too much for one person to absorb that much information, especially if they're not athletically inclined to do certain moves.
Yeah.
So I just asked.
They have to build their muscle memory.
Yep. And like I asked Nate if I could just teach a basic beginner 101 class, and he gave me the permission. So I actually started teaching in 2012. Did that I stopped like around 2013, 2014 because I went to grad school. Didn't start up again until I graduated in 2016. But that was when I started training in another style of Filipino martial arts called Balintawak. And I focused more on that because I started going back to Defensor method, and it just came to the point where I'm like, where is this training going? Because there was no curriculum or formalized curriculum with Defensor method. We were just doing a lot of stuff, and it came to the point where I'm like, I would drive an hour because Nate was teaching in Hyde Park.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was like driving an hour just to get there, and most of my time was explaining and teaching these students as opposed to me getting my reps.
Yeah, you learning.
So I'm like, I'm not enjoying this anymore.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine, he moved here around 2013. His instructor in Cincinnati is actually good friends with Nate, and his instructor like told him like, hey, once you move to Chicago, train with Nate and his guys. And that's how I got introduced to Rob, his name. And when he first came to my class, I was like, oh, he's just a newbie. But then I noticed like, oh, this guy's got some moves. And then he told me like, yeah, I've been training Balintawak in Cincinnati under Grandmaster George Pennefield. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like I've always been interested in that style. And then we just developed that relationship. I'm like, all right, well, I'll teach you for free if you teach me that style. And I went Balintawak hardcore from 2016, and just I became more consistent with that.
Yeah.
Up until I became fully qualified instructor last year. And at the time I was still training Defensor method, but that wasn't really my focus.
So you're not a guru at Defensor method?
I am.
Okay.
So within that time, Nate was getting sick. March of last year, I think it was like around 2020 when him and Jason finalized the curriculum, and that's when I started like, okay, things are formalized now, because I always look at things as from the perspective of a teacher of like, how would I teach this in a scaffolding format where I'm like point A to point B to point C. So they ironed out the rough curriculum, which turned out to be like 15 levels. But for you to like, yeah, I want to learn this to self-defense and fight, I'm like, you need to have that fighting spirit, because we're dealing with weapons here. It's not like we're going to trade punches and kicks. I mean, people can eat a punch or a kick. But I'm like, if I hit you with this wrench, or if I hit you with this rattan stick, or even with trainer blades, you'll feel that impact.
Yeah.
Because people freeze up, like, in boxing, like you see the newbies, you hit them and they freeze up.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
No, I mean, I remember doing Kali, dude, and I remember getting smacked in the hand with with that bamboo stick. Mm-hmm. That'll make you think about your hand for a really long time, because your hand would be pulsating the whole time that you're doing the rest of the workout. Because I was just like, I'm not gonna give up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna keep going. But my shit feels like I could feel my heartbeat in my hand right now.
It's like, oh, I have an artery there. I was like,
yeah.
But yeah, man, it was just like, yeah, it's those are the two systems that I'm a guru in. Mm-hmm. And there's so many other systems out there that, I'm cross training and learning stuff. Like, I just can't stop.
Yeah.
So as an instructor, like, yeah, I could teach you, here's the syllabus. It's like going to school. All right, semester 1, here's the syllabus. We can cover this. It all depends on your dedication. And then when I'm not teaching, I'm like, now it's my turn to start learning new stuff. Like I see this style, I'm like, I'm going to reach out to them, start cross training with them. And then, that's pretty much, my routine. I'm like always keeping an open mind.
And are things like fundamental? So like when you go from one style to the other?
Yeah, for me, yes. Since I've been in the martial arts since on and off since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Primarily with like the Filipino martial arts, the commonalities is like it's all weapon based.
Okay.
And there's only certain ways you could maneuver an object, like an object. It carries on from one style to another. I mean, they might have a different methodology. Yeah. In their ways of doing things, but in the end, it's like there's only a certain amount of ways you could hit a person with a stick, or cut someone with a blade. Because in the end, it's just like the end product is for you to end the fight as fast as you can.
Yeah, for sure. To limit your exposure.
Exactly.
Yeah, man. Like one of the really cool things about training that I found was soft weapons. I had never heard that before. before training with Guru Nate.
Mhm.
And he was just like, yeah, you could take a newspaper and beat the shit out of somebody with the newspaper. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So it was just like, yeah, that was an interesting concept I never really thought about. And then I saw like Born Identity,
Mhm.
where Matt Damon was beating the shit out of old boy with the
magazine.
newspaper.
Yeah,
I was just like, I made the connection. But I don't think that it will end up like that. But
Yeah, there's like people don't use newspapers or magazines anymore. It's everything is read online on your cell phone.
you got to hit him with the tablet.
Pretty much, but then it goes like $500 out the window. So I was like,
Yeah, man. So this is what I remember about Guru Nate. Just so the audience knows who Guru Nate was. Guru Nate was like super funny and quirky to me. Like every time he would make you laugh while you were training. He was witty. He was you could see him being the life of the party. As far as like keeping a wit that made you pay attention. So that was what I observed from him while I was training with him. What was he really like?
And yeah, as an instructor, very creative in terms of he could see any movement and copy it without a problem.
Yeah.
And then he would try and teach that to the class. Very, I like, where's that term? Like a mad scientist. He could just come into class with messy hair. He'd wear clothes that were like not his size. Like he just woke up and then started teaching. And it was like
extra small pants. Yeah, he was funny though.
It was
man,
but I was like, okay, and he had a dog, so he had like dog hair all over his pants. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he was definitely a giving person too, because when I first started coming back into training, I didn't have any money. And he just like, well, let's work out some type of scholarship or trade where if I do a video for him and I take the classes. And it came to the point where I'm like, I was like doing a lot. Not that I wasn't doing a lot, but I was training a lot, and also like in exchange, so like instead of money, when I had money, I would give it to him. But in terms of like the exchange of like energies, where I'm like, it's like, what can you do to help promote us or promote me, or what it's like back in the old days in the Philippines. I'm like, if you don't have money, bring food.
Yeah.
So so he really gave me that scholarship, that opportunity to learn the art without charging me an arm and a leg for it.
That's what's up, man. So yeah, you owe a lot to him, and that but you gave back, right? So it was like it was a barter.
Yeah.
What was it like when he passed away for you?
Well, I knew he was having health problems because during the last 2 tests before we became gurus, he couldn't be there. He could only watch us via Zoom. Me and my other friend went to go visit him, and it was tough seeing him in that condition.
I've been in that situation, man. My mom passed away from cancer, and those last days were hard.
And there was like 3 of us in the hospital room that evening, because he actually passed the following day.
Okay.
But yeah, just for a person that was like just a few years ago was able to move around and throw you around and do all these wonderful things, all of a sudden he's like on his last days.
Yeah.
I was like, it puts you in a perspective where I'm like, life is too short. And I've learned a lot from him as a martial artist.
We were talking earlier, and it's just like specifically like the Filipino community that surrounded the Hamlin house had really important people kind of pass away, right? Like one of them was Randy. Randy was Demetrio's cousin, and man, he was into video as well. He was doing video machete.
Yep.
Video machete as well. What was it like to lose him? Were you close to him at all?
I was close to him because I was tight with his brother Romeo.
Yeah, Romeo was funny.
Yeah, I would say I was tighter with Romeo than I was with Demetrio.
Okay.
And he would come to the Hamlin house a lot too when I was living there.
Yeah.
We talked from time to time. Last memory discussion we had was like, he was like really excited. He's like, yeah, I'm turning 21 in a few months. I can't wait. And then I got that phone call about the accident.
The thing that I remember about Randy is that he, I MC. He was always like, let's do a track. And I'd be like, man, like I'm kind of busy. I'm doing this. Yeah, we'll do it. But let me just gotta get this done, or I gotta get that done. I'd see him again. He'd be like, yo, let's do a track. I'd be like, yeah, man, I know, but I never, ever, like, that's the first person that, like, I had not blown off, but I was just like, we have time.
Yeah.
We have time to do it. Don't worry about it. Like, you're younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not, like, he was, how old was he when he passed?
He was 20.
20. What year was that?
2010.
We got time, dog. Don't worry about that. And it turned out we didn't have time. Yeah, it affected me in the sense that it was just like I put it off, I could have recorded with him. And I feel like now I'm motivated to get things done, especially with my mom passing away too. Like, you see how finite life is,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was a good brother, man. He was a good brother. Funny.
Yeah. I mean, and then like that realization hit me hard too, like during this whole pandemic. That, and then last year after Chris passing away.
What was that like for you? Like, what kind of relationship did you have with Chris? So Chris was like super, super about the Defensor technique.
Yeah,
right?
so he was the one that was consistently teaching and promoting Defensor method. But
he was like number 2, right? He was Guru Nate's,
I would say,
right hand.
No, he would be the number 3 guy.
Number 3. Okay.
Yeah, that
so
was
Justin
active.
Was number 1, number 2.
Jason.
Jason, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Chris, like I think I mentioned that. But yeah, I mean, we both had the passion for the Filipino martial arts, and we were always big into cross training and learning various styles of Filipino martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
So he would travel and learn different styles on top of Defensor method. And I'm the same way too, but I don't like to stretch myself out too thin, where I'm like, I have to devote myself into learning that system until I can become proficient at it.
Mm-hmm.
Cross training is cool, but I always look at it through a lens as like a teacher. Like, if I'm learning this, how would I pass on? Yeah, how would I pass on this information to the next person based on how they want it taught?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it was like, when Chris passed, that was like a month after we got our guru rank.
So he got his guru rank and then passed away
a month later.
Wow.
We were talking about, now that we're gurus, what are we going to do? What's our plan? Like, do we still want to push Defensor method, or are we all going our separate ways? And, last thing he told me that I remember was like, he's a big proprietor of cross training, and there was things within the curriculum that could be taken out. And he wanted to, tell people within the Defensor method, like the students, I'm like, once you reach a certain point in your training, like after say like a certain level, go train, find someone else to train with. And if you don't like the way how they do things, come back to us. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I told him, let's talk about this when I get back from Florida. Cause like, this was the same time I was going to Florida for a month. Mm-hmm. So I remember that was around April, end of April.
Yeah, I remember you were posting pictures of beautiful beaches.
Yeah.
I was like, this.
Well, dude, that was the first time.
It was cold out here, right? What month was it?
That was like end of April.
Yeah, it was still cold.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this dude's living the life over there.
Well, that was my first time to get out of Illinois during the whole pandemic too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I left. I was leaving that Thursday evening going into Friday morning, and that's when I get the text message from his wife. So I was like, what the heck? I was just talking to him on Sunday, and he we were both teaching on the online platform. So I'm also a part of another Filipino martial arts organization where we promote Filipino martial arts and teach online.
Mm-hmm.
And I got Chris involved too. So, he was teaching this class that Sunday before he passed, and they said he looked fine. But something happened. Yeah. And I was just like, dude, I was like, I'm in Florida because I was covering content for the YouTube channel for FMA Pulse.
Yeah.
And I already made my plans to do all these interviews and travel between Central and South Florida. You know, I just felt bad that I wasn't able to like fly back for the funeral.
Yeah.
But it was just like, you know, I was like, dang, this is messed up.
Yeah.
You know, so I was just like seeing all these posts on social media. Just like,
So how did you go through your mourning process then? Because so I imagine that has to be a weird place to be in, right? Because it's just like, this is something that you've been working for, right?
yeah. Well, things I was so busy and occupied that kept my mind off of it. But once, you know, the video shoot was done, and like after like my networking and dinner was done, hanging out with the people, that's when, you know, it hits you like when you're no longer occupied doing things. So there's a few times, you know, I would, you know, walk on the beach. You know, I was thinking about them, and then I saw a pelican just zip past me. Because in like the Filipino culture, if someone passes away, they come back. Their spirit comes back one more time to say goodbye, and they'll come back as a form of like they'll come back as an animal, like either like a bird or a butterfly. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'm walking down the beach and just pelican just zips by me. Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah, I know that's you, Chris. So, yeah, you know, I was there for a mission, but you know, the whole thing where I'm like, when things slowed down, where I was on a break, I would think about Chris during like my time there. You know, and it's weird because when you hear other people say, you know, live your life, life is short. You know, I'm living my life. It's different when something tragic happens to you directly, when you know the person. Because when you hear another person say it, like, yeah, you're empathetic, but it hits you different when it's someone that you know, or hits closer to home. So like for me to say that, like, you know, live your life, you know, life's too short.
Sounds cliche.
Yeah. But it hits you way different when it happens to you directly. And that's why it's like, live tomorrow, like, you know, you could die tomorrow.
Tonight.
Or whenever. I mean, that's why I've been traveling so much. Because I'm not waiting for anyone. I'm not gonna wait for my friend. Like, hey, I want to go to Brazil. You want to come with? He's like, wait, I got to know. I'm out. I was in Brazil in February for like almost 3 weeks. So if I want to go, I'm gonna go. I'm not waiting. You know, when I tell Mike, like, hey, I'm going to California to, you know, hang out with the guys in the Bay Area, you want to come with? He's like, I gotta, you know, work. Well, I'm going. So it's like,
peace, deuces.
Yeah, I don't wait for anyone anymore. Like, if I want to do something, I'm gonna do it. Yeah. And, you know, it's just like, it's the freedom to do what I want. I mean, granted, I don't have the responsibilities of, you know, of having like a wife and kids, and you know, it's liberating. But, you know, I do think about, like, what if, like, yeah, if I had a wife and kids, or if I had a kid, you know, life would be different. But I guess things are different for me, in terms of where my life has taken me up to this point, because I'm focused on one thing. Like, martial arts is my wife. It is, you know, what I'm dedicated to. And, you know, I'm putting myself in my heart and my soul into it. Without any challenges stopping me.
It's really great to see you like reach your goals. You know, when I saw on your Instagram, I think, because I couldn't blow it up, but there was a picture that you had of you like training, and it had the lineage of all your gurus.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's a badass picture, man. Like, you need to brand the shit out of that. Like, make it your profile picture, because that is so dope to like see where
the lineage comes from.
Yeah, like the path to where you've gotten, you know. And that I would make that a poster. I'd make that some artwork, you know. Like, it was pretty impressive. I was just like, and Instagram, you can't really blow stuff up. And I
Yeah.
was trying to read what each one of them was.
Yep.
I'm really impressed by what you're doing, man. I really appreciate you as a friend. I thank you for coming. Is there anything else that you would want to like say to anybody as an advice? Like what would you tell somebody that wants to get into martial arts and wants to kind of meld two things that they really love doing together and like making a market for themselves, you know what I'm saying? Like I see you and how you're making your business and you're really fully dedicating yourself, and how you're just like, you're not trying to work for anybody else, you're working for yourself.
Well, I mean, like the whole saying where it's like, whatever works for me may not work for you. Whatever you do, martial arts or anything, like, why are you doing it? Are you doing it for recreational purposes? Are you doing it for therapy? What is the reason you're getting involved with anything? It's like with you in boxing, like I'm sure it's therapeutic on top of it being healthy. For me, like getting involved in the Filipino martial arts was just trying to get reconnected with my roots in a different way, as opposed to like learning it through a history book or attending like cotillion events, or cultural events. And the thing is, it's like whatever you do, it's like, especially within martial arts itself, like what are you doing this for? Is it for health? Is it for self-defense? Is it something spiritual? Is it a combination of the two or three? It's, why are you doing this? And if you're not doing something that you're passionate about, then why are you doing it? Because not only wasting your time, you're wasting the other person's time that's willing to teach this. It's the same thing like when I was being a video teacher at the high school. It's like, I'm passionate about video and media. I'm trying to teach this to you, but then again, you guys are acting like little shitheads. And like, it's the same thing with like me being a teacher in martial arts. Like, I don't mind teaching, but if you don't have the dedication for it, then why are you here?
You're wasting both of our times.
Yeah. And if you're looking for a mentor, I'm like, oh, I don't want to cross that line. Because now it's like within, as a teacher, not only in the academia, but also in, sports as well. It's like they want that mentorship also, but I'm like, that's a tough line, because I'm like, I don't want to get involved in your personal life. And I just want to keep it, we could be cool, but don't rely on me as like your therapist. So, but yeah, just to make sure that find a reason why you're getting involved in something. And if you're going to do it, go at it 100%. Don't wait for anyone. If you have to go through it on your own, do it. But just make sure you surround yourself with the right people.
And then why do you do it?
For Filipino martial arts?
Yeah.
I mean, I just do it for the community. The people I've met so far have been really hospitable, and been really welcoming, especially during seminars. I'll go there and it's like a family gathering. So yeah, training is cool and nice, and I get to learn a few things, but the real experience is after the seminar, where we're out eating, we're talking. It's the community aspect of it that I'm really attracted to. It's a lot of like martial arts will have that, but for me being of Filipino descent, it's just reconnecting me with my people. Because like I said, I didn't grow up with Filipinos, so most of my friends were like I said, Haitian or Puerto Rican, with one Irish and one Jewish kid. So I didn't really connect with the Filipino community until I was like late teens, early 20s. So that's the reason why I do it, and the reason why I'm doing FMA Pulse is like to promote an underserved community to the martial arts world, because everybody knows the martial arts that's coming out of China, Korea, Japan, Thailand. People still don't know what Philippines is or what a Filipino is. And I'm doing that through the Filipino martial arts.
Word. Well, thank you very much. And is there any way that people can reach out to you? How can people reach out to you so that they can know more about Filipino martial arts? Or how can they, if they want to shoot their video, or they need video work, or What are your contacts so that people can get a hold of you if they're interested in working with you?
Well, I got a couple of emails you could reach me through. For Filipino Martial Arts, you could reach me at jessie.fmapulse@gmail.com. So that's Jessie, JESSIE .FMA Pulse, FM as in Mary, A Pulse @gmail.com. For my video work, you could reach me on Jessie at nomadicjfilms.com. So again, that's Jessie, JESSIE @nomadicjfilms.com. So you could also follow me. I got various social media stuff, like my Instagram. It's my personal one, but I respond to it as just_J_Santiago. Hit me up, and I travel a lot, so hopefully I'm still around. Or I just signed my lease for another 6 months, so I don't know if I'm still going to be in Chicago after the 6 months, though.
Ooh, you gotta stick around, man. You a good brother, but I wouldn't be mad if you grow and go somewhere else. But definitely, Chicago is blessed to have you, man.
I appreciate it.
All right, brother. Well, signing off, 500 and Growing podcast. I am your host, Jesus Azteca 500 Sanchez, and Jessie Santiago.
500 and growing.
Podcast.
Visit 500andgrowing.com for more creative content.
Ready to set it off and on, cause I see you. Correcting all that is wrong, cause I see you. Dedicated to your craft, read and study the math. Making goals and taking a stand. Original, so you trailblaze a path. In tune with your inner master plan.
Thank you very much for listening to the 500 and Growing podcast. Remember that we have incredible guests that have already featured in episodes in the past. So please go back into the archives and listen to their inspirational stories. And then remember that we have incredible guests lined up for the future. So please follow on Instagram at 500 and Growing Podcast. Remember to follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the major podcast platforms.
500 and growing.
Podcast.